A week had passed since Elias Cross walked out of that boardroom. 7 days since he said no to $900 million to some. That moment was the end of a business deal, but to millions watching around the world, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Everywhere you looked, newspapers, podcasts, classrooms, social media, people were talking about one thing: the man who chose dignity over dollars. At Crosstech headquarters, things had changed too, not in structure but in spirit. The staff walked taller, the energy was different. And for the first time in company history, job applications flooded in, not just from top schools but from forgotten neighborhoods, small towns and quiet places where hope still struggled to grow. People saw something in Elias now, not just a CEO but a symbol. On Monday morning, Miranda entered Elias's office holding a fresh binder. "You'll want to see this," she said. Elias looked up from his desk, curious. She placed the binder in front of him. It was titled, "The Collective, a network of minority-owned tech startups." He flipped through it. Pages filled with profiles of young founders, innovators from backgrounds like his. Some were still in college. Others had been rejected by investors. "For years they want you to lead it," Miranda said softly. "They want you to be the face and the backbone." Elias leaned back in his chair. His heart was quiet but full. All this time, he thought, turning down the Winthrops would close a door he didn't realize he'd opened 1,000 others. That evening, Elias visited his brother Dante's community center in Brooklyn. The building was small but alive. Laughter from classrooms, coding lessons on dusty laptops, art on the walls painted by kids who still believed in miracles. Dante walked over, smiling. "Back in the trenches, huh?" Elias laughed. "You never really leave the trenches." They sat together on a worn-out bench outside. "You changed the game," Dante said. "And not just for you, for all of us." Elias looked up at the dark sky. "I didn't want to become a headline. I just wanted to be treated like a man." Dante nodded. "And you taught them what a real man looks like." The next morning, Elias held a live stream from his office. No stage, no suit. Just a hoodie, a camera, and truth. He looked straight into the lens. "Some people think I won because I said no to $900 million, he began. "But that wasn't the win." He held up a letter. It was handwritten. "A 14-year-old girl from Detroit wrote this to me yesterday," she said. "I saw your video. Now I know I can be strong too." He paused, heart swelling. "That's the win." The internet exploded with love and praise. Celebrities shared his speech. Teachers played it in class. Activists quoted him. Other CEOs who had stayed silent for years began speaking up. The ripple became a wave. Later that week, Elias hosted a private event, not at a hotel, not in a ballroom. At a community school in Baltimore, the same one he attended as a child. The small gymnasium was packed. Teachers, parents, old friends, young dreamers. Elias walked on stage wearing the same jacket his mother had once sewn a patch onto when he was 13. "This," he said, "is where I learned what real value means." He told the story of Crosstech, the deal, the disrespect, the decision. And then he announced something no one expected. "I'm investing $20 million into building tech labs in 100 underfunded schools across the country." The crowd gasped. "It's time we stop waiting for the powerful to care. We become the powerful who do." As he stepped down from the stage, a little boy walked up and handed Elias a drawing. It showed a superhero in a suit, holding a computer in one hand and a heart in the other. "You're like him," the boy said. Elias smiled, knelt down and replied, "No kid, you are." Back in his office that night, Elias sat at his desk. Everything was quiet again. He looked out over the city, a city that once ignored him. Now it listened. On the desk in front of him sat two things: a dusty old photo of his mother and a blank sheet of paper. He picked up a pen. "I'm ready," he said, softly. Not to sign a contract, but to start a new chapter. To start a new chapter. One built not on deals, but on legacy, truth, and power earned the hard way. Because in the end, the real win wasn't the money. It was never the money. The real win was walking away with everything that mattered still in his hands. The end. A HopeCore story. White billionaire family mocked a black businessman, but he held the $900 million power. The morning was clear. No clouds, no rain, just sunlight streaming through the windows of the Winthrop Group's main building in New York. Inside the tall tower, behind glass walls and golden doors, the final meeting was about to begin. Elias Cross walked into the boardroom in a navy suit, sharp, unshaken. But today, something was different. He wasn't here to talk, he was here to decide. At the far end of the table sat Bradford Winthrop, the patriarch of the family. On both sides were his sons, lawyers, and advisors. The room smelled of old money, quiet confidence, and hidden pride. Bradford stood, smiled, and extended his hand. "Elias," he said smoothly, "we're glad you reconsidered." Elias didn't shake his hand. He sat down instead. The room went quiet. Miranda was beside him, calm as always, but alert. She had already reviewed every line of the new contract, every promise, every lie hidden between the words. One of the Winthrop lawyers slid the thick folder across the table. All terms agreed. $900 million. Full independence. No interference. Elias didn't touch the papers. Bradford leaned forward. Let's build a legacy together. Elias finally spoke. Let me ask you something, Mr. Winthrop. Do you believe in partnership? Bradford blinked. Of course. Then why treat me like a product? The room stiffened. One of the sons spoke. We've shown nothing but respect. Elias turned. To him, your cousin called me a project from the hood. You called this deal a charity. That's not respect. That's insult, dressed as business. Bradford sat up straighter. That was unfortunate. We can't control every word at the dinner table. Elias nodded slowly. But you didn't correct them. You let it happen. You wanted my company, my mind, my work, but not me. Miranda slid the contract back across the table, unopened. No deal, Elias said. Bradford's smile finally cracked. Excuse me, you heard me, Elias replied. I'm not selling. You're turning down $900 million, one of the sons asked, his voice rising. Do you even understand what that means? Elias looked at him calmly. Yes, it means I still own my name. The room fell completely silent. Cameras in the hallway started flashing as Elias and Miranda stood up. Bradford stood too, now visibly tense. You'll regret this. You're walking away from a legacy. Elias gave a small, quiet smile. I'm not walking away. I'm walking forward without you. And with that he left the room. Outside, reporters swarmed. Elias didn't stop for questions, but Miranda whispered, they'll twist this again. Elias glanced at the crowd and then back at her. Then we speak first. That afternoon, Elias held a press conference in the Crosstech auditorium. The lights were bright, and the cameras pointed right at him. The whole business world was watching. Stepped up to the podium, microphone in hand. I have a simple announcement, he said. I am not for sale. The audience leaned in. I built Crosstech with nothing but a laptop, coffee, and faith. I created jobs, innovation, and hope. I did it without shortcuts, and I will not hand it over to a family that sees me as a symbol, but not as a person. He paused. Let the weight of silence fill the room. This was never about money. It was about respect, and if I lose that, what's left? The crowd rose to their feet. Applause filled the room. Online, the stream exploded, millions watching live. Hashtags began trending again. Hashtag not for sale. Hashtag Crosstech stands tall. Hashtag know your worth. Later that evening, Elias was back in his office. He stood again at the window, city lights glowing beneath him, but he wasn't thinking about deals anymore. He was thinking about power. Not the power to own, but the power to choose. Miranda entered quietly. News just dropped, she said. Winthrop shares fell 7%. Investors are asking questions. Elias didn't smile. He just nodded. We're not done, he said. No, she replied. You're just getting started. His phone buzzed. A message from a small startup he once mentored. Thank you for standing up. You gave us courage. Another from his brother Dante. This is what legacy looks like. Proud of you. Again. Elias looked at the photo of his mother once more. I didn't lose anything, he said softly. I found something stronger. And in that quiet office, above the city that once tried to forget him, a black businessman who turned code into a company had turned rejection into a revolution. The sun shone brighter that day, but Elias Cross's office was quiet and still. Outside the glass tower, New York moved fast. Taxis honked, crowds passed, and deals were being made on every street corner. But Elias wasn't thinking about money today. He was sitting at his desk, staring at an old newspaper clipping. Local boy makes good. Elias Cross named to Forbes 30 under 30. It was yellowed at the edges now, framed in dark wood. He had kept it for years, not for the fame, but for the message it carried. Proof that he had made it, when no one believed he would. Beside it stood a photo of his mother, her arms wrapped around two boys, Elias and Dante. Her smile was tired but proud. He touched the glass of the frame gently. You believed in me before the world ever did, he whispered. Just then Miranda walked in. She placed a fresh coffee on the table and raised an eyebrow, still staring at that. Elias, they gave a soft smile. It keeps me grounded. Miranda nodded. Good, because things are moving fast. She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a storm of headlines. Elias Cross sparks national debate on race, wealth and power. Black CEO rejects $900 million. Says respect matters more. Crosstech now seen as a symbol of self-power. He scrolled slowly. The truth was spreading not just in business circles, but in homes, classrooms, even churches. People were talking and listening, but not everyone was happy. Miranda sat across from him. The Winthrops just released a new statement. Elias sighed. Let me guess, damage control. She nodded. They say the deal failed because of differences in vision and that they wish you well. Elias looked at the wall, silent. They're trying to sound innocent, Miranda added. Like none of it ever happened. Elias looked at her. That's how power hides. He stood and walked toward the window. The city skyline stood tall in front of him, but he didn't see buildings. He saw his past. He saw the small kitchen in Baltimore where his mother cooked rice and beans every night. He saw her reading tech books late after work just so she could teach him what public schools wouldn't. He saw Dante building robots out of cardboard. He saw every rejection letter, every not a fit for our company, every awkward silence in interviews when they saw his face. And then he saw where he stood now. Do you regret it? Miranda asked. Walking away from $900 million. He said, still facing the window. She nodded. He took a moment, then replied, no, I regret that I even considered letting them buy my silence. She smiled. That's why you lead this company. That afternoon, Elias met Dante at their mother's grave. The graveyard was peaceful, with tall trees and soft winds. They stood in silence for a while. I saw the clip, Dante said. You crushed it. Elias didn't answer right away. He bent down, placed flowers on the grave and whispered, I hope she's proud. Dante placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. She is. They stood together, looking at the stone. Clara Cross, mother, fighter, dreamer, 1949 to 2003, she used to say. Dante began, don't give them your name if they won't say it with respect. Elias nodded. She taught us to fight quiet battles, and now the world is hearing the noise. Later that week, Elias was invited to speak at a business school. The auditorium was packed, not just students but faculty, reporters, and even rival CEOs. He stood on stage with nothing but a microphone, no script, just his voice. When I was a kid, he began, people thought success meant changing who you are to fit the room. He looked around. I'm here to tell you, don't shrink to fit the room, build a bigger one. The crowd clapped to walked away from a $900 million deal, not because I didn't want the money, but because I wouldn't sell what built me. He paused, letting the words settle. My mother once cleaned offices in buildings like this. Now, her son owns them. The room fell silent, then exploded in applause. Back at Crosstech, Elias entered his office alone. The evening light filled the room in gold. He walked to his desk and picked up the photo of his mother again. You were right, he said quietly. Some people will never respect you unless you teach them how. His phone buzzed, an email from a group of black entrepreneurs across the country, asking him to join a new initiative, a startup collective to empower minority-led businesses and mentor the next generation. Elias smiled. It wasn't just about his story anymore. It was about what came next. He looked at the photo one last time and said, we're not done yet. The rain came lightly that morning in Manhattan, the kind that didn't soak clothes but still made the sky look gray and tired. Elias Cross sat by the window in his office, coffee untouched, his eyes on the street far below. He had walked away from $900 million. Most people would call that madness, but Elias didn't feel mad. He felt awake. Still, the air felt heavier today. Something was off. He turned from the window and walked to his desk. On the glass surface sat the contract he didn't sign. Right beside it was the photo of his mother. He picked it up. I didn't walk away from the money, he whispered to her photo. I walked away from them. Just then Miranda walked in without knocking. She looked worried. You've seen it? She asked quickly. Elias frowned. Seen what? She handed him her tablet. On the screen was a headline. Winthrop Group to rescue struggling startup. Sources say CEO Elias Cross was desperate to sell. Elias's jaw tightened. Another headline popped up. Winthrop's offered charity deal to Baltimore-born tech genius charity. They're rewriting the story, Miranda said. They're trying to make it look like they were helping you. Elias's heart burned. The company he built was now being painted as weak, broken, needing to be saved. And worst of all, people were believing it. Social media was exploding. Some people defended Elias. He built that company from nothing. Don't trust the Winthrops, but others were cruel. $900 million, and he said no. Sounds like a pride issue. He should have been grateful. See, they help and still get called the bad guys. Elias felt sick. They were doing it again, changing the truth to protect power. He got up from his chair and walked out. Miranda followed close behind. Where are you going? She asked. To remind them who I am, Elias said. Later that evening, Elias appeared on a national talk show. The host introduced him as the tech genius from Baltimore. He smiled, politely, but he wasn't there to perform. I want to clear the air, Elias said as soon as the show began. Crosstech is not failing. We just completed a $200 million merger with Wilson Dynamics. The host blinked, surprised. That's not what the headlines are saying. Elias looked straight at the camera. The headlines are written by people who want to control the story, he said. But let me tell you mine. And he did. He told the world about the microaggressions, the dinner jokes, the silent disrespect, the way they smiled while trying to own him. I didn't walk away from a deal, he said. I walked away from disrespect. That's the real cost. The studio went silent. The host slowly nodded. That took courage. Elias gave a small smile. Sometimes, saying no is the strongest yes you'll ever give. The next morning, the video had gone viral. 10 million views. Hashtags like #StandWithElias and #Dignity over dollars were trending. People were angry, but this time, not at Elias. They saw through the Winthrop's mask. News outlets now wanted his side. Bloggers praised him. Other black CEOs started sharing their own stories. Elias had not just rejected a deal, he had started a movement. Back in his office, Elias sat quietly as the world buzzed. He picked up his mother's photo once again. "See what you raised," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "I didn't sell out, Ma. I stood tall." Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his brother Dante. "You did it. You told the truth." And they listened. "Proud of you." Later that day, Elias held a press conference. With cameras flashing, he stepped up to the mic. "I want to make something clear," he said calmly. "Power without respect is nothing. No amount of money can replace honor. I didn't build Crosstech to sell it for a seat at someone else's table. I built it to build my own." The crowd clapped. Some stood. He ended with words that would go on to be quoted in books and speeches. "You can buy a company, but you can't buy a man who knows his worth." Back at the Winthrop estate, Bradford Winthrop watched the broadcast on TV. He was silent, for the first time unsure. His empire had money. But Elias had something more dangerous. He had the truth, and now the whole world could see behind the mask. The next morning, the Winthrop estate looked peaceful, sunlight shining on its white walls, birds flying across the large garden, and expensive cars parked like trophies. But Elias Cross felt none of that peace. As he walked through the wide halls, everything felt fake. The Winthrops were dressed in their finest. They spoke with soft voices and smiled often. But Elias could feel something hiding behind those smiles. Something cold. Bradford Winthrop met him at the breakfast table, wearing a suit that probably costs more than most people made in a month. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Yes, thank you," Elias replied calmly. "Good. We're so excited about this partnership." "You're not like the others." Elias paused. "What others?" Bradford chuckled. "Oh, you know, tech types, all brains, no class. But you have polish. You're different." Elias forced a polite smile. But in his heart, he heard the message behind those words. "You're not like the rest of them." It was the same thing people said to him in college, in boardrooms, at airports, and it never felt like a compliment. As the day went on, the comments kept coming. One of the family's sons gave him a tour of the estate. "So, Baltimore, huh?" the young man said. "That must have been rough. Like real rough." Elias nodded. "It taught me a lot. Yeah, I mean respect. Street smarts, survival. Right. You know, stuff we only see in movies." Elias said nothing. Later, one of the older uncles clapped him on the back and laughed. "Bradford told me you coded your first software in a public library." "Man, that's some rags to riches stuff right there." "Yeah," Elias replied. "And now I'm here." The uncle grinned. "See, the American dream." But Elias didn't feel like he was living a dream. He felt like he was standing in a place where everyone saw his success but not his soul. That evening a formal dinner was held in the great hall. Long candlelit tables, expensive wine, fancy words. Elias sat at the center next to Bradford, surrounded by people who smiled too much to them. This wasn't just a deal. It was a performance. Bradford stood and raised his glass. "Let us toast to Elias Cross, the man who proves anything is possible in America." Everyone clapped. But Elias didn't move. Across the table, someone leaned over and whispered, "Bet your mom's proud, from food stamps to fortune." "That's wild." Elias's heart sank. And then it happened. A young man, clearly drunk, stood up with a grin. "Imagine that we're buying a company built in the hood." "What's next?" "Making deals in Compton." Laughter followed. Awkward, nervous. Bradford didn't say a word. Neither did anyone else. Elias slowly stood. He picked up his glass. Everyone turned to him, expecting a thank you. But Elias only said, "Excuse me." He walked out of the room in silence. Outside, the sky was dark. Stars twinkled above the large trees, but Elias didn't look up. He stood by the garden, breathing slowly. His phone buzzed. A message from Dante. "Remember who you are, not what they want you to be." Elias looked down at his shoes. He felt like a guest in a world that wasn't made for him, even though he had earned his place more than any of them. Back in his hotel, Miranda waited. She stood near the window, her arms crossed. "They didn't even try to hide it," Elias said. "No," Miranda replied. "They didn't have to." He walked over to the table where the contract lay, thick, full of promises, full of lies. "They're not offering a partnership. They're offering ownership over me." Miranda looked at him. "So what do you want to do?" Elias stared at the paper. He thought of the nights he stayed up building software. The nights his mother worked late just to pay for his schoolbooks. The days he was told he'd never succeed. He picked up a pen, but he didn't sign. Drew a deep breath and put it back down. "I want to see how far they'll go," he said. "Let's go to the final meeting. I want to look them in the eye and decide." The next day, Elias returned to the estate for the formal meeting. Everything was ready. Coffee, notebooks, contracts. The room smelled of power. But Elias didn't feel small. He felt strong. Bradford began speaking in his usual calm voice. "We're excited, Elias. $900 million, full independence, no interference. This is legacy-level stuff." Elias looked him in the eye. "And control of all patents." "Of course, all yours." Elias leaned forward. "And public branding. You'll be the face, but not the voice," Elias said quietly. Bradford blinked. "What do you mean? You want me to smile for the cameras? But behind the scenes you'll own everything." "Bradford," chuckled Elias, "this is how business works. Elias nodded slowly. Not for me. He stood up. This meeting is over, he said. Bradford's smile dropped. Excuse me. Elias looked around the room. I thought I was being welcomed, but I was being sized up. You never wanted my ideas, only my image. Bradford stepped forward. You're walking away from $900 million. Elias smiled, but it wasn't kind. I'm walking into something better. He walked out. No handshake, no goodbye, only silence. The cold morning light came through the tall windows of a glass tower in Manhattan. The city below was busy, loud, alive, but high above all the noise, one man stood still, Elias Cross. His dark eyes stared at the skyline, but his mind was far away. In his hand he held a small photo. It was old, worn out around the edges. His mother was smiling in it, proud and full of hope. Elias ran his thumb gently across her face. He whispered, "We made it, Mom." Elias Cross had built his life from nothing. Born in a poor neighborhood in Baltimore, raised by a single mother who cleaned offices at night and taught him math during the day, Elias had never forgotten where he came from. Now, he stood as the CEO of CrossTech, a tech company worth hundreds of millions. A name people respected. The silence in his office was broken by a soft knock. "Come in," Elias said. The door opened and Miranda Lynn walked in holding a tablet. She was smart.com and Sharp, Elias's closest friend since their Harvard days. They had built CrossTech together from the ground up. She smiled. "Good news first or bad news?" Elias chuckled lightly. "You always do this. Just say it." She walked over and handed him the tablet. "The Wilson deal is complete. You just made CrossTech stronger than ever. And this morning we're trending on Twitter. You're a star." Again, Elias smiled, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. "That's the good news." Miranda nodded. "Now the strange one." Elias raised an eyebrow. "The Winthrops called." The name made the room feel colder. "The Winthrops," he repeated. Miranda nodded again. "Bradford Crawford Winthrop himself. He wants to schedule a meeting. They're offering $900 million to buy Key." Elias leaned back in his chair. For a second, he said nothing. The Winthrop family was one of the oldest and richest white families in America. They were powerful, connected, and had never failed to get what they wanted. Miranda continued, her voice a little slower. "They say you'll have full control after the acquisition. No interference, just money and freedom." Elias picked up his mother's photo again. "It sounds too perfect," Miranda agreed. "That's why I wanted to talk to you first." He stood up, walking to the window. The city still moved like it didn't care what deals were being made inside this tower. "I don't trust them," Elias finally said. Miranda didn't push him. She knew his story. She knew about the people who had smiled at him while calling him names behind closed doors. But then Elias turned back. "Set up the meeting, you're sure?" she asked. "I want to see what they're really offering. And I want every word in that contract checked twice." That night, Elias drove to Brooklyn. His younger brother Dante lived there in a small apartment filled with community art, kids' photos, and energy. Dante ran a non-profit that taught kids in poor neighborhoods how to code and build futures like Elias had. As soon as Elias stepped inside, Dante looked up from his laptop. "You serious, Elias?" he asked. Elias took off his coat and sat down. "It's just a meeting. The Winthrops don't want partners. They want trophies," Dante said sharply. Elias stayed quiet for a moment. "It's a $900 million offer." "Yeah. And how much of your soul is included in that price?" Elias looked at the floor. "It's business, Dante." Dante stood up. "You always say that. But one day it's going to stop being just business." Elias didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the photo on Dante's wall, their mother, holding them as kids, smiling, brave. A few days later, Elias arrived at the Winthrop estate in the Hamptons. The mansion was large, elegant, and cold. Expensive artwork filled the halls, but everything felt like it was covered in ice. The Winthrop greeted him with wide smiles and strong handshakes. Their words were polite, too polite. Every sentence felt like it had a second meaning. "Such a pleasure to have you here, Mr. Cross," said Bradford Winthrop, tall with silver hair and a voice that sounded like it had never been challenged. "We've heard great things," said his wife, with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. The tour of the estate began. They showed Elias their private library, their tennis court, their indoor pool, all to impress him. But during dinner, the small insults began. "You must be very lucky, Elias," said one of the cousins. "So rare to see someone from Baltimore succeed like this." Another added. Elias smiled politely, but his fists were tight under the table. "You speak so well," someone said with surprise, as if they expected him not to. It was like soft punches wrapped in silk. And then a cousin, clearly drunk, laughed and said, "Can't believe we're about to buy a company run by a kid from the projects. Wild, right?" The room went quiet. Elias said nothing. He slowly placed his fork down and looked around. Every face was waiting, watching to see if he'd react. He didn't, not then. Later that night, Elias stood alone outside under the stars. The wind was cold. His hands were in his pockets. He thought of his mother again. He thought of how hard she had worked. He thought of the people who said he didn't belong, and now he thought about these people, with their money and fake kindness, thinking they owned him. Back in his hotel room, Miranda called. "You okay?" she asked. Elias sat on the bed and looked at himself in the mirror. "They think I should feel lucky. You don't." He looked down. "I built this from nothing. I don't need to be bought. Not like this." There was a long pause on the phone. Then Miranda said softly, "What do you want to do?" Elias looked at the ceiling. "I want to remind them who I am."